People who have witnessed a "there's not going to be a wedding" moment following a bachelor or bachelorette party, what went down? Story 1. I'm a musician. I work on an infamous street for drunken revelry and debauchery. One night, a bachelor party came in around the same time as the bachelorette party. The show I work with does special things like funny songs for special events, so I bring them both up at the same time to do something special. In the middle of this, on stage, they start making out, and they do not stop. I finish my routine as best I can and get them off stage. Later, as I'm looking around the audience, my eye catches on them again. They're in the back corner just going at it, while their respective parties hang out up near the front of the stage. And they're really getting into it. Hands down pants and up skirts. At some point, they disappear. I take a break and head to the restroom. It's locked. I hear a woman screaming from within. Not moaning, not sighing, screaming. F me harder! I sat in the lounge area outside the bathroom for about 10 minutes. The bachelor and bachelorette came out, looking a bit disheveled, but not too bad. They see me and immediately want to chat. For some reason, people always want to get to know the musicians here. There's curiously no guilt on them at all. I have to pee like a racehorse, but this is too good to pass up. Come to find out, they both are getting married to other people, but know each other from having lived in the same small town of about 5,000 all their lives. They ran into each other for the first time since high school graduation at our bar, and old feelings emerged that neither had ever attempted to act on. They don't stay long, and as they leave, I hear the bachelor say, "I have my own room, let's go there." The rest of the party stays till the show is over, partying hard and having fun. Possibly the best bachelor-bachelorette parties I've had. Usually bachelor parties get too drunk, and bachelorette parties devolve into crying fits and arguments. Anywho, I wind up seeing the bachelor and bachelorette together at our bar and out in the street every night for 4 nights. Always holding hands and or getting frisky. They came back a little over a year later. They got married here in our town to each other instead of who they were engaged to that fateful night. Most of their respective bachelor and bachelorette show up for the event. With this story, I always feel torn. Did I participate in the destruction of 2 relationships, or did I facilitate the meeting of 2 soulmates? It's kind of hard to know what to make of this one. On one hand, it's a classic case of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. On the other hand, it's kind of hard not to feel a twinge of guilt, knowing that the 2 relationships were potentially destroyed in the process. But who knows, maybe these 2 crazy kids were meant to be together all along. It's certainly a romantic notion, and the fact that they got married a year later only adds to the charm of the story. But for me, the whole time, the only thing I could think of was SpongeBob Patrick and Mr. Krabs saying, "Debauchery!" Story 2. There's a story that goes around. I can't vouch for the truth of it or not. Call it an urban legend. First of all, if you've never been to a Jewish wedding, the way it goes is, first they have the reception, with the bride and groom in separate rooms, then the ceremony, then family goes away to sit for pictures, while the guests sit down to eat. Then the bride and groom come in and the dancing starts. In between the ceremony and the pictures, though, is what's called Yehud, which doesn't really translate, but it approximately means isolation together. The bride and groom lock themselves in a room and are observed by 2 reliable witnesses outside the door to have stayed therein long enough to have consummated the marriage. Although nobody actually does it there, it's considered déclassé. This is what actually solemnizes the marriage. Well, one of 3 things. The other 2 are signing a marriage contract, called a ketubah, and transfer of a piece of chattel property, traditionally a ring, though it can be other things, from the groom to the bride. So after the Yehud, the bride comes out and announces, "Sorry everyone, the wedding's off. We'll be getting a divorce and we're returning all the gifts." Except for the bedroom set where I caught my new husband trying it out with my sister last week. So, there are far worse stories here in this very thread. What makes this one noteworthy? Well, think about this. She knew about the episode before the wedding. Why'd she go through with it? Because under Jewish law, if you've only been married to a woman, even after divorcing her, you aren't allowed to marry her sister at any time until your first wife has perished. By going through with the ceremony, she, in effect, locked her sister out of ever being able to get together with her soon-to-be ex. I think the fact that they have this law in Jewish culture to begin with says a lot about the proclivity of men to do this throughout history. Still, this seems like a more civilized version of betting from the Song of Ice and Fire series, or Game of Thrones for those that have only seen the series, where it's intended to provide evidence that the bride and groom have consummated their marriage, commonly held after the wedding feast is over, and with many, many witnesses. Story 3. After the wedding at the reception, the newlyweds took forever to show up. They were nearly an hour late. When they did arrive, they were arguing loudly the entire time. They got introduced, and we all clapped, as per tradition, and they sat down at the main table in a huff. Sometime between the appetizer and the main course, the argument started again. The groom stormed off, and my girlfriend and I were nosy, so we went to see what was up. He ended up in the hotel lobby on his phone. We thought nothing of it, and we were about to go back when the wife showed up, still obviously in her wedding dress, and continued to ream him out. Now, for the first time, we can hear what the argument is about. He had invited his ex to the wedding. She showed up to the ceremony and threw the bride off. Apparently, also, he had cheated on the new wife with the ex-girlfriend several times, with the last time being only about a month prior to the wedding. Additionally, the ex-girlfriend, mistress, was on her way to pick up the new husband to take him away from the new bride, because she was acting crazy, according to the groom. After a couple minutes of watching this train wreck of an argument, a poopy rust bucket sedan shows up with the ex-girlfriend in it. The groom gets into the car with his ex, or whatever she is, and they drive off. Last words went to the bride, though, who screamed at him as he tore off, "Well, I guess I'm going to go back to fricking your brother then, you butthole." So they're no longer married now. Story 4. Buddy's bachelor party. Bachelor got super wasted, and the father of the bride was shocked and did not know the well-mannered, polite young man marrying his daughter was in his eyes a raging alcoholic. The bachelor got so drunk, he began to let some secrets slip about his relationship with the bride. The father of the bride was a bit old school in his thinking. The bachelor let the following slip. His daughter was basically living with him since junior year of college, and her apartment in college was for show for the father of the bride. Even though he's drinking a lot, his future wife can outdrink him 2-1. His future wife has a cute tattoo on her inner thigh, and that all his and her friends have seen it when they went skinny dipping at the father's lake house. We had a massive graduation party at his lake house when he and his wife were in Europe for 2 weeks. The bride is into some kinky stuff. That drew the line. The father declared there would not be a wedding. Where has he gone wrong raising his daughters? Then he said his life is over. He has 4 daughters total, and this was his oldest, and who he considered his best behaved. Story 5. Friend invited me to his wedding. He and fiancé are fairly poor and have lived together for years. They're both semi-disabled. His is PTSD, hers is physical, and on fixed incomes, and live in a somewhat expensive area. They have 3 gift registries: Target, Macy's, Crate & Barrel, and a huge invite list. Over 300 friends and family members. All the stuff on the registries is standard stuff like towels, coffee cups, flatware, etc. Anyway, people fly out, get ready for the wedding. 2 days before the wedding, there's bachelor party, and the friend gets drunk and admits that she's not really his fiancé. They're just roommates, and they have no intention of getting married. They just need the stuff. They're going to cancel the wedding tomorrow and keep all the gifts. Had to protect him from getting his butt kicked by about 24 people. Then had to have the fiancé come clean to everyone since he was too hungover. They ended up returning most of the gifts to people, but a surprising number of people let them keep the gifts. As his grandfather said, if you needed these things that badly to lie like this, you must have been very desperate. I feel like if you can fool 300 of your closest friends and family into believing you and a roommate are getting married, you deserve the gifts as a reward for selling the act so well. Like, people had to have known if they were truly involved in their lives at all, and if they weren't, then no harm done, since they clearly don't care enough about these two to recognize what their relationship actually was. Love is love is love is love, and these guys have been living together for years, so I think that's something to be celebrated as well. We shouldn't just reserve gifts for people who are betrothing themselves to each other. Story 6. Obligatory, not me. I worked at a music venue in the Detroit area that was also a popular wedding reception location. Came into work 1 week in the fall, when pretty much every weekend is booked solid with weddings, and noticed Saturday was open, no one scheduled. Talked to the wedding planner, and she told me the groom canceled. Odd. Talked to the wedding planner's younger brother, who was our head barback. He tells me that the groom, excited for the wedding, left work at lunch on Friday, bought a nice bottle of wine, and headed home to surprise his bride. Except he was the one in for a surprise. As he walked into his new house to hear sounds coming from their bedroom, he walked in to find his bride in bed with another man, his dad. We tried to talk him into doing a big FU party because we'd never fill the space and there was no refund, but he declined. Story 7. My friend had been with his fiancée of 8 years when she got pregnant. Fast forward 8 months, and we decide that because they're basically common law married, we need to throw him a bachelor party. So we go to the nearest big city, and he's abused by strippers, and we are all quite drunk when he gets the call that his fiancée is in labor. None of us is in any state to drive. We end up calling a cab and paying over $300 to get him to the hospital as soon as possible. My friend stumbles down drunk when he walks into the delivery room, smelling like strippers, with a dong drawn on his face and covered in glitter. I was positive that was the end. They've been married 7 years and just had their second child last week. Yeah, rookie mistake. Take it from a guy who's about to have his first kid, so I guess I'm technically also a rookie, but I would never make this mistake. Don't go anywhere when your wife is 8 months pregnant. She could pop at any moment. Story 8. One of my best friend's wedding was canceled when he learned she slept with a stripper after her bachelorette party, like 3 days after. He's happily married now with a kid. Worst part was that it was a destination wedding, honeymoon, and he couldn't get a refund. So we all went anyway, and he was super depressed the whole time. His family was all there too. Story 9. A week before his wedding, a friend of mine walked in on his dad doing it with his fiancée. The next day, in a fit of rage, he trashed their room and in the process found explicit love letters between his recently married best friend and best man in her underwear drawer. Underpants drawer, as I like to say. The letters were as recent as the past week. The wedding was canceled. Whenever I ran into him at a bar, I made sure he never had to buy his own drinks. Story 10. While working the night before a wedding at a hotel, the staff and I heard a loud scream from upstairs. Cue the bride screaming and sobbing, shouting, "The wedding's off!" while storming out the place, followed by the groom stark bullock naked, covering his nether regions with his hands, apologizing profusely. Turns out she caught the mother of the bride and the groom shagging. Safe to say we had an easy shift the next day, as we didn't have a wedding to cater for. Story 11. My cousin runs a popular upscale marriage venue and always tells the story way better than this, so here's a rough overview. The groom's mom was a heavy drinker and got belligerent when she drank, so understandably the bride wanted the groom to try to limit her drinking. The afternoon before the wedding, the bride arrives to see the groom's mom smashed with the groom himself giving her beers. Next thing my cousin knows, she was there to oversee preparations, the bride and groom are in a straight-up fist fight, which leads to an Anchorman-style street fight between members of both families in the parking lot. Apparently, they recently scheduled a new day for it. I can't imagine the tension there. Brick killed a guy with a trident. Story 12. I used to work at an upscale wedding venue. 2 weeks before a huge, expensive wedding, the groom's father passes away, so they ask us to turn the wedding into a funeral instead. They were a lovely couple, and it was really awfully sad when it happened. But I still use it as my go-to answer for describe a time when you delivered outstanding customer service type questions in job interviews. Sorry. Story 13. Sister of the groom chatted with the sister of the bride, just casual conversation, but it came to light that almost 100% of what the bride had said besides her name was a complete lie. Sister of the groom calls him up and says he really needs to figure out if this is right. A few fights and some long thinking later, the groom leaves her and leaves town. It got worse though. Turns out pretty much all the bride's friends had been lied to as well. They all stopped talking to her. Story 14. Bachelor party in Vegas. Bachelor hooks up with a girl, gives her his cell phone number so they can continue the party that night. Bride-to-be is sitting at home with the iPad, getting all of the iMessages from the girl. She canceled the wedding that day. Story 15. Not me or anyone I know personally, but in Detroit there's an AM radio show called Dave and Chuck the Freak. The show is pretty much what you'd expect. Dong and fart jokes mostly, but they had a question to the listeners one morning on this exact topic. The story went that the caller had gotten super drunk at his bachelor party, and some of his groomsmen sodomized him with liquor bottles and took photos. The caller had even stated that he brought this up to his fiancée, and she basically said, "Get over it and don't ruin my big day." Needless to say, having this info out on the Metro Detroit radio waves caused quite a backlash against the groomsmen and fiancé, even ending in some kind of legal battle, if I recall. Anyway, the caller received very positive support from the community to cut it off with his fiancée. There was even a trending hashtag on Twitter for a while after. Story 16. I had a buddy whose fiancée slept with a male stripper at her bachelorette party. He found out, but wasn't totally irate about it. They had a pretty open relationship and flirted all the time with other people. Anyways, a couple of days before their wedding, he got drunk and slept with one of his fiancée's friends. He told her what he did, and they both basically said, truce, and got married. 8 years later, they're happy with 2 kids. It's weird though, because the friend that he banged still hangs out with all of us. No one really talks about it. True story, man. This couple sounds not too dissimilar from the quote-unquote open relationship between Tom and Shiv from Succession. I just hope that this guy didn't swallow his own load at his bachelor party.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.